Hello, everyone. Glad we all joined today on event for bottlenecks in supply chain. And let me introduce myself. I'm Dennis, head of supply chain vertical in Innovex. And I'll go to introduce my colleagues. Andrew Pavlichin, program manager for US Cold. Andrew Komarov, solution architect for Innovex. And Michael Biller, Vice President for Supply Chain Center of Expertise in Innovex. Uh, we're here today to discuss what role of supply chains is currently playing today, and it is actually very significant. And it's starting from foods delivery till drugs. And our goal, our main target is to support these processes and actually prevent all the obstacles and all bottlenecks we're facing today due to all the external reasons. I'll give a word to Andrew Pavlichin to introduce use code, and then I'll take part for Innovex. Andrew, please go
Sure.
ahead.
Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate it. First and foremost, thank you everybody or thanks Dennis and Innovex for inviting me to participate in this forum. I think it's a great idea to talk about these things in a public setting and get an understanding of the supply chain issues that a company like ours is facing. To introduce myself, I'm Andrew Pavlison, as Dennis mentioned, program manager specifically for a proprietary warehouse management system. So the building and delivery of a warehouse management system here at US Cold. And today I'd like to talk just a little bit briefly about who US Cold is and what we do. We are a third-party logistics company specializing in the cold chain, so refrigerated and frozen food specifically. So we support customers who manufacture food for the most part. We began in 1899. At that point, we were manufacturing ice, but we've been around for 120 years. And as of I think 1982, we were purchased by our current parent company, who is Swire. Swire is an English multinational company with holdings all across the world, really. You might recognize some of the brands that they are associated with: Cathay Pacific Airlines, Swire Coca-Cola Bottling, Swire Properties. It's huge in Hong Kong, very big presence in the Hong Kong area. And then there is a private side associated with Swire as well. And US Cold is the largest private side entity of the Swire Group. A little bit about US Cold. We do have 43 distribution centers across the country, roughly 1.3 million pallet positions. That translates into 373 million cubic feet. And I think roughly around 3,600 employees. I think that number might have even gone up recently. So, but that's hopefully give you a framework of what we're working with in terms of total size. Here's what our network looks like. So as you can see, we are definitely kind of limited to the United States domestic. Our key target areas of where we choose to build and operate are West Coast, California, very big presence in the Dallas, Texas area. And in addition to that, of course, the Northeast, as you can see, a number of our sites. Our corporate office is in Camden, New Jersey. And we are in the process of actually building more sites across the country. And we should have a few more in California and Indiana as well. Just a quick note in terms of our size as it relates to the overall public refrigerated warehousing market. We are roughly the third biggest, making up, I think, roughly 10 to 11% of the market share of that industry. So some of our corporate goals at US Cold naturally are financial stewardship, to provide a nice return on investment for our parent company, Swire. We look to prepare for the future for our customers, collaborate closely with customers, and expand in key markets where they need our services. Typically, that ends up being in heavily populated areas where distribution becomes increasingly important. We pride ourselves on executing successfully. So, a common expression you'll hear at US Cold is try to be best in cold. And to us, that is truly to provide the best possible customer experience with high service levels and, just in general, good customer service. And a big part of that is to extend our transportation capabilities. So a big part of what we do is our transportation business alongside our warehousing and storage. I'll briefly touch on that in a minute here. Next slide. This is just a couple brands that people might recognize from our network or customers that are important to us. Unilever, Danone, Butterball, Kellogg's, some of our larger accounts at US Cold. I did briefly want to touch on the US Cold automation strategy, as I think it will probably lend itself to the conversations that we have a little bit later when Dennis begins moderating. But just to give you a sense of what US Cold warehouses look like, the majority of our sites are conventional. And what I mean by that is, for the most part, people are operating the warehouses with forklifts, reach trucks to get through the day's operations. However, we have in the last few years made a concentrated effort on trying to increase the levels of automation throughout our warehouses. And that strategy was largely a crawl, walk, run type approach, where in the beginning we were choosing very specific processes and, working with various material handling equipment to try to automate elements of the high labor expense areas of our operation. Then we did look to kind of walk, so to speak, which was implementing more automation, more robotics within our processes. And then lastly, we did kind of get up and running with fully automated warehouses, where I believe we have our third one commissioned last week. So we are moving in that direction. And I think there's a multitude of reasons why, which I'm sure we'll dive into in some of our conversations. Next slide. A brief word on our logistics services. I alluded to earlier that transportation is a big part of what we do at US Cold. And really there are three branches of what we offer in terms of our services. One is what we call our cold share consolidation, which is a freight consolidation and distribution model, really a savings provided to our customers in their ability to distribute freight to end destinations, vendors like or consignees such as Walmart, Targets of the world. We offer managed services, which are really kind of taking the end-to-end supply chain in terms of from inbound through outbound of the US Cold sites. So we look to operate all of that, those movements within the supply chain for a customer. And then lastly, a logistics services arm, which is somewhat of a consulting application, really, where we're looking to perform analysis for customers as to what they should be doing within their 3PL network and where they should be located based on the historic demand. Next slide. This is kind of a brief introduction into our cold share consolidation program, which is essentially a multi-vendor, multi-customer way of getting savings. So what we do is we look to lower traditional LTL cost by combining freight going to the same locations within our warehouses. So oftentimes in our warehouses, we'll have a bevy of different customers that are all going to the same locations, same grocery type locations or distribution centers. So what we do is try to reduce their cost by allowing them to share trucks. And the benefit to the food manufacturer is that it does reduce their transportation or traditional LTL costs. It reduces stop charges throughout the process. That charge is allocated across all of the customers that would ride on that given truck. It does reduce some product damage and terminal cross-dock impacts. And lastly, there's a side benefit that it does reduce carbon footprint because you're not using as many trucks. And then naturally, the benefit to U.S. Cold is that we make money off of that process. So, in general, this is a huge part of what we do at U.S. Cold, and something that I think kind of separates us from some of our competitors as it's become an increasingly important part of what we offer to our customers. Next slide. I think that was it, actually.
Thank you, Andrew. So
Yep.
a few words about Innovex as a vendor. So Innovex was founded in 2011, and we are a vendor for IT services and solutions with more than 800 employees based mainly in Ukraine, but we also have offices in US. And this is one of supply chain is one of the key domains we have, and also we have gaming and financial domains as well. With Use Cold, we have a partnership from 2017, and currently we've rolled out 11 warehouses from the network of Use Cold that we're actually very proud of. And uh, here is one organizational moment that I want to ask is if we have audience, do not hesitate to comment or ask any questions in YouTube channel. I'm looking on it, and if I'll found your comment there, I'll ask for our key speakers. So getting back to supply chain, what is about the key processes? Oh, by the way, what is about WMS, warehouse management system, transportation management systems? What are the key processes, and what what part of these processes should be automated and are critical for the business? So I'll address this question to Andrew, and we'll go one by one in open discussion.
Sure. So to us, a warehouse management system allows us to track inventory, process our customer orders, and really optimize the way in which we are picking and receiving product and ultimately shipping out to our customers. And then naturally billing our customers for those types of movements within our warehouse. So, for us, the most critical parts that we're looking to automate are the labor intensive things. So we do a lot of case picking, individual cases where we are then stacking on a pallet, where a person will actually have to do that physical labor. And in our world, if you're doing that physical labor in a very, very cold environment, upwards of negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, naturally that takes a toll on people's bodies. So what we look to do is try to find solutions that allow us to try to automate some of those procedures in an effort to kind of reduce our labor cost and then, be able to just operate more efficiently.
Gotcha. So also this question of performance. So maybe we can touch some performance cases, Andrew Komarov. Maybe you can give briefly how we reached some performance metrics.
Yeah, it's not only about performance. Like we also have a point in our discussion about the human mistakes, and that's really all about automation. So, like if we are talking about performance, we can say that fully automated warehouses can operate 24/7 without taking any breaks and paying extra to all employees during night hours and so on. So like where we can work 3 times better, let's say, than without automation. Again, we can utilize more floor space if we're using autonomous guided vehicles, for example, because they take less space and can move between aisles and racks with high pallet density. If we are using them in combination with the automated stacker cranes and so on, because the employees that are driving forklifts require a lot of space, actually. Again, it's about higher accuracy for some critical processes in warehouse, because there can be still human mistakes when we receiving products or picking them or just doing a regular count back. That also can be pretty easily automated, and like people on the floor do not need to go on the fourth floor, let's say, to count back cases on the pallets, like if we can use drones for that, if you will. Yeah, and like automation decreases the injury risk, because according to United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, transportation and warehouses are among the top 5 private sectors with highest incidence of injuries. So we can get rid of that, let's say, easily. So that's, we can talk about that pretty long, probably. Let's say cold storages require continuous monitoring of goods, because it's very critical to have stable conditions, and like a single mistake can ruin the entire shipment. So if we talk about easy automation that, let's say, measures temperature from time to time, it significantly decreases that risk. And again, the increasing level of automation decreases the labor cost, and that makes possible to build more resilient processes and more resilient supply chain in the regions where the labor cost is still high. And also, let's say, human mistakes are making waste, and making waste is not the way to build the green logistics, and green logistics is a trend nowadays. So most consumers and customers and talents choose companies that are committed to ecological excellence. What else?
Thank you. Maybe some cases practical about maybe the most crucial. I believe we had something with calendar conversion for dates.
Yeah, like it's an easy one. Like in our warehouses, we have the feature with code dates. It's the manufacturing date of products, let's say, and some of them are coded in Julian calendar. And like before we've introduced the system, it was done like manually using the tables of Julian calendars and converting it to normal dates inside the cold storage. So where it's -20, -40, you know. But there are like more practical examples. For example, an example from our competitor from the Lineage Logistics. They are using the process that they call flywheel electricity optimization. So they are using the machine learning and artificial intelligence to predict the properties and to make decisions when to cool down the warehouse before the peak electricity consumption, when the prices for electricity is high. So they cool down the warehouse for a couple of degrees below normal, and then using the renewable sources to keep the processes working, like a good case of automation.
Colleagues, maybe you have some additional comments here.
Well, Andrew touched on he touched on a lot there, a lot to unpack. But I would just kind of echo the same sentiments about some of the benefits for us for automation are, he mentioned density and being able to be able to fit essentially more product into our warehouses with automated solutions. Um, with an automated solution, we don't really have the challenge of material handling equipment being able to only reach certain heights. So, in other words, we can build up higher than we historically have had. So we can take advantage of capacity in that respect. And then in addition to that, we can work within narrow aisles. And I think Andrew even mentioned that as well as, we can use crane type systems as opposed to traditional forklifts, which require wider aisles for safety reasons. And, when you start talking about using automated solutions, you essentially can get more product into your warehouse and take advantage of not having to limit yourself to human intervention using traditional forklift type and reach trucks. I think the other thing I wanted to call out from what Komarov had mentioned as well was just some of the human risks aside from the safety risks that he alluded to, but the mistakes that occur within warehousing, human mistakes that can really have quite a ripple effect throughout a warehouse and create a tremendous amount of inefficiencies, is when something as simple as counting your inventory slightly incorrect manifests itself in some serious inefficiencies further down the line um, when you're looking at trying to optimize your operation, and your inventory accuracy ends up being poor. It leads to a tremendous amount of inefficiencies when um, forklift operators or pickers go to try to find product and it's not there. So I just wanted to call out that when you have human intervention involved in a lot of these processes, it can lend itself to uh, naturally some inaccuracies in your inventory. So within an automated solution, you kind of take away some of those things. And that's not to suggest automation is a walk in the park by any stretch, because it is very difficult to set up, particularly in our type of industry where we do have a tremendous amount of different customers with different requirements. Um, but I did feel the need to kind of echo those same sentiments and maybe add a little bit more to what Andrew was mentioning.
Also, I'll add some comments from me. Is first also probably ability automation allows ability to automate the houses in that way to have optimal reaction on, for example, consumption, like about replenishment processes that allows to, for example, for some food stores to fulfill the uh, needed needed foods uh, in the right way in to support customer to support the actual customers. And this is one of the ways, like automation also allows work with the data and use this data for replenishment processes.
Yeah, like also if you touch the replenishment, a good example is the peak line solutions when warehouse management system um, predicts the product that you are shipping usually, and when you like build the pallet within one run through the aisle, let's say, and it really reduces the time for picking. That is the time-consuming operation.
Sure. Okay. So we also slightly touched, but let's move on to the question regarding the processes. If they are uh, standardized for each warehouse, or we have to come up with each new approach for each new warehouse. I'll probably address it to Andrew Pavlichin.
Sure. So for us, I think you kind of bring up a good question. Is what happens if you don't have some level of standardization across your network? And in our case, 43 different sites. If everybody's operating in 43 different manners, it would make it very difficult then to have technology to support the daily operation. So we do try to make an effort to standardize as much of the processes as we can. So, for instance, our receiving process across our network is pretty similar. In fact, we even call it generic receiving because it is pretty commonly, I guess, executed the same way across our network. However, I do think you encounter specific customer requests that alter the standard operating procedure. And oftentimes those are revenue generating tasks where a customer will ask you to do X, Y, and Z to a pallet, maybe mix pallets or, a whole host of other things to really meet their end customers' goals. So that can create some fringe cases in which we do have to accommodate within our warehouse management system. But for the most part, I would say our processes um, are fairly similar across the country.
Michael, do you have your point of view regarding standardization of processes for WMS and TMS solutions over US?
Right. Well, first of all, Dennis, thank you for moderating. You're doing a great job. And our special thanks to Andrew from US Cold Storage for joining us here today. And, we talked about this a little bit at the break. There are different platforms that are out there. And Andrew, you touched on this a little bit, but we have TMS, Transportation Management Systems, WMS, Warehouse, and IMS for inventory. And, along with those, your company, our customers are running ERP and they're using CRM for, demand management or demand planning and SCM software on top of that. So, one of the things that we're seeing is, and in cold chain, it adds more complexities to it. But one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing in the market is integrating all those systems, being able to build APIs, and then when you go outside the network, for instance, like US cold chain, when you're US cold storage, when you're working with multiple carriers, they may have ELD devices that are now mandated by the government, and they may be on smartphones. They, could be a Motorola device that is given to the drivers by the company. And so being able to track all of that from a delivery standpoint, it can be a real challenge. So what we see the major challenges, just like Andrew said, is really in the integration process. But the further you can automate, the better for the most part, because at the end of the day, you've got to meet your customer SLAs, And we had one example with a customer of ours who was shipping. It was a meat product that was going to Walmart, and for a fraction of the trip, the temperature threshold went below went above what the SLA was, and so it negated the whole shipment. So we couldn't deliver it. And if we had some way of tracking that truck or the trailer and finding out when if it was getting close to that threshold, what we could have done to fix it on the fly. And those types of fixes on the fly are going to be that's going to be a byproduct of automation. So I think again, the biggest thing that challenges we see are on the integration side.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And this is the next question. Actually, we are touching it again. It's about taking care about all the connections and dependencies between our ERP system, WMS system, TMS, and the IMS. This is also one of the points, and you correct, Michael. You mentioned APIs. We also can discuss about universal interfaces like ADIs. And maybe a couple of words, Andrew Komarov, regarding ADIs. How do we manage it?
We do have separate standalone application for that, which was created for parsing the EDIs and storing the standardized data inside our database that can be used with our other parts of the system. And yeah, EDI is probably the most world-known standardized document that really helps to communicate between consumers, customers, third-party logistics, transportation, and so on. But yeah, it's the most often used work in software development to transfer data from one state to another. And without that, we cannot build like effective networks which are really modern right now. Like supply chain as a service is a new modern word where you can, let's say, outsource some parts of the supply chain. So data standardization is really needed here, and maybe EDI can help also.
When we had short talk, we also touched about consolidation process, and actually consolidation is a part of what is done with TMS and WMS. So maybe Andrea, you have a word here.
Yeah, I think you started off with just touching on the various connections that a good warehouse management system is going to have, or in our case, it's a requirement that we have to be able to integrate with our transportation management system, our financial systems, CRM, labor management systems, all kind of have to have some level of integration and sharing of information across those various platforms. But in terms of a connection between a transportation management system and our warehouse management system, it is a very key connection, because it gets down really to the nitty gritty of the operation. And I guess what I mean by that is, if we don't have a good, thorough connection between those two systems, when we're building our truckloads to ship out of our facilities, which potentially could have multiple stops, and if we don't send that information of what the stop sequence should be to our warehouse management system, the operator who's loading the truck then doesn't know, where to place the product on the truck. And that's a key component, in the supply chain, really. Otherwise, you run into significant delays. If the truck driver reaches their first stop and the product of that is supposed to be unloaded is at the nose of the truck instead of the rear of the truck, the operator is then forced to unload the entire truck, which is pretty much a waste of time. So those are the key pieces of data that actually do have to be transferred back and forth between our transportation management system and our WMS. So that's just one example, a key example of that information that needs to be passed.
Yeah, thank you. And let's go to a question that actually is pointed by a Gartner report from 2020 is the level of influence of COVID-19 pandemic on supply chains and as a business sector, and how this business sector reacted. So probably I'll give a word to Michael.
Right. Thank you, Dennis. So, prior to the pandemic, most supply chains had been optimized down to the last widget because they were more linear and vertical and easier to predict. And strictly cost optimized value chains require throwing out a bigger net to to find cheaper suppliers and vendors. But the biggest issues today revolve around the bottlenecks caused by the supply chain disruptions, and a part of the root cause of that is logistics. But we had for instance, we had the Suez Canal blockage, and followed by semiconductor chip shortage, which impacted the car manufacturers. And then that's only been magnified by the truck driver shortage and the container crisis. And, of course, the ports are congested, so there's demurrage, and, it's the conditions are, most people have never seen conditions in the market, and especially the supply chain like today. And this has caused companies to realize the absolute necessity for flexibility, resiliency, and faster decision making as a life raft for their supply chains. And so the difficulties in supply planning and in demand forecasting and managing inventories and efficiently utilizing transportation and warehousing capacity has also taken on a new sense of urgency. And as U.S. cold storage here today is witnessing it firsthand. And again, we talked about this, but temperature controlled space, warehousing space, and transportation is at a premium. And the cold chain adds another layer of complexity to this, because you have the SLAs that you have to meet for your customers. And so in warehousing and fulfillment, one of the critical segments of today's supply chains is what we're discussing today. It's in the cold chain. So the pandemic, if anything, has forced companies to automate, and we've learned that you need to nail it and scale it fast, and that's what it's come down to today.
Yeah,
Andrew?
Michael, that was a great summary of some of the supply chain issues that we're certainly seeing. I can speak to at least firsthand what U.S. Cold is having to work through as a result of COVID-19, and it certainly is multifaceted. It's impacted our business in a number of ways, and our responses have been fairly drastic. Specifically with U.S. Cold, you can almost kind of separate our customer base into food services, which is customers that are supporting restaurants. And then on the other side is the more retail side of things, which is more grocery oriented. So, throughout COVID-19, we definitely saw a decline in food services with restaurants simply being closed, right? That's starting to recover for sure. But the retail side took off because everybody was, shopping at the grocery store and cooking at home. So that side of things really kind of picked up. But naturally, you could kind of understand what that means in a supply chain context when you have such massive fluctuations in demand. It makes things a bit tricky. At least domestically, I can speak to, one of our biggest problems and challenges at US Coal has been significant labor shortages from the beginning, from the onset of COVID, even through now. And there's a number of reasons why we're having labor shortages. I think part of it is the fact that there's been significant unemployment benefits provided. Companies like Amazon are kind of pricing us out in some of our markets where they pay a lot of money for warehouse operators, and it can be difficult to lure people into working in a very cold environment when they can do the very same thing, same job, in a dry environment. So the pandemic kind of resulted in some labor shortages for us, and that's across industry. It's not just U.S. Coal, but so our response to that has been a fairly intense concentration on trying to automate some of the processes that we alluded to earlier, to try to offset some of those labor challenges. So that's been a huge focus for us in the past year, and a big part of our investment is in those capabilities. And then on the transportation side of things, you're seeing significant driver shortages. Rates have increased across the transportation industry, and really just making things that much more difficult. Then, our vice president of transportation actually just did a presentation the other day, and he mentioned that loading times across the network right now to unload and load trucks have gone above 2 hours, which on average, which usually warehouses, at least in our industry, try to be under 2 hours for load and unload time. And so loading times have increased, and in part it's because we don't have the labor to support it. And what that means is increased supply chain disruption. When things are taking longer to unload, you have to somehow respond to that. And I think what that's translated for us in a company that relies on fulfilling our customer obligations by creating multi-stop loads to offset transportation costs. Some of those things become near impossible when it's taking too long to unload your product. You miss your delivery windows. So what ends up, that translates into having to use multiple trucks to perform that function or that node within the supply chain. Hence a driver shortage. So you can see how it's kind of a vicious cycle right now within our operation for sure. I think we do see some positive in all of this, and that I think people are starting to get back to work now, and I do believe that we'll pull through this. But I also don't see us really stopping the automation process in our facilities, at least. I think that's going to be a continued concentrated effort, as we've seen some success stories within that space.
I also want to add that after the COVID, some omnichannel principles were born. So everyone understood that the old brick and concrete store won't work anymore. And now we need to have different delivery and pickup options. And the e-commerce raised a lot, and with recent predictions, until 2024, nearly 70% of consumers will be online grocery shoppers. And again, one of our competitors, Lineage Logistics, committed to build an e-commerce network just to send probably directly from the warehouses to the end consumers.
Thank you for your comments. I have also curiosity here about if new supply chains appeared during pandemic. So for me, it's example of delivery of those drugs and vaccine. Maybe something else appeared. what do you think for this?
I'm not sure I follow. So are you asking, like our company did not get involved in vaccine storage. Our facilities don't get down to that temperature. I think they were required at negative 60 or something Fahrenheit. I can't even recall. I
Up
know
to
it was
70, yeah.
super intense. Yeah, super intense cold storage. We haven't really played in that space historically, partially because you're talking about mixing food and drugs in the same warehouse. It could get pretty ugly. So we typically don't get too involved in pharma related supply chain, um, endeavors.
Okay, got you. Uh, Probably some of you have additional questions to raise. I'm taking a look on the chat if we'll have some questions there. So actually, we don't have questions in chat. Probably if you have some topics to bring up, you're very welcome now. Good. Okay. So let's finalize with few words about the choose of vendor for automation and digitalization. What is the key criteria or for US Gold to choose a vendor?
Yeah, so I think before you talk about choosing a vendor, it's kind of an understanding of what your requirements are as an organization, and where you are in terms of your journey. If you're a warehousing company that doesn't even operate a WMS and is using a paper-based system, you might not need a Ferrari, you might need a Honda Accord, so to speak. So that there are off-the-shelf solutions that certainly fill the void and need for a lot of different warehousing companies out there. But in the case of U.S. Cold, a fairly mature company that has operated a legacy system for 30 years, 30 plus years, in our transformation, we were looking for a vendor to assist us in kind of building our vision for what a WMS means to U.S. Cold. So with that, when we talk about a vendor that we would like to partner with, like Innovex, we're looking for obviously talented people, technically savvy people who know how to build products in what we consider the right way. And, we're heavy into agile concepts and we look for that in a vendor. But then in addition to that, developing tacit knowledge around our business. And I can't speak enough to how the folks we've worked with at Innovex have started to really understand warehousing better than some of our own people, and it's truly impressive to have that technical capability alongside business acumen and being able to kind of marry those two things up to create um, unique products that help us operate our buildings better. So, we're looking for people to develop that deep domain knowledge, and we're looking for what that kind of translates to is a vendor that will go that extra mile for us. And that means to us is developing that knowledge, supporting things like rollouts, system conversions, system upgrades, and being flexible in their overall approach and being able to handle new requirements as our business changes. And I think it's been pretty clearly demonstrated that our business is changing as a response to what's happening in our global markets, and we need our vendors to be able to kind of be right there alongside us and be able to pivot in an ever changing business landscape. So hopefully that gives you some insights into what we're kind of looking for um, in our partners to develop software.
Yes, you definitely do. And I'll ask also Andrew Komarov regarding how better to understand customer from the side of a vendor. What experience you have on this way?
Only building a personal relationship. go into business trip and speak personally to each of the guys, speak to the guys on the floor to understand the needs. And for me, it was like a best motivation to help those people that are freezing in the warehouse to automate as much as possible and to build the best processes for them. Man, that's all probably.
Perfect timing for the dog.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you a lot. And Michael, a few words from you, from your perspective.
Right. So, I think Andre is hit the nail on the head. Every one of our customers has a unique supply chain and logistical ecosystem, and they're running different, ERP systems, and they've got different CRM and SCM platforms, and they're looking at migrating to the cloud, and they're looking at a lot of they've got a lot on their plate right now, and planning in terms of how all of this is going to automate and integrate in the future, and what kind of APIs are going to need to be written. You need a technology leader in the industry to help with the development of your supply chain network. And today, the language of supply chain is changing rapidly. So traditional supply chain management, as we think of it, has been replaced with digital supply networks, because it's more horizontal. You've got to cast a wider net out to suppliers and vendors. So with that comes the integration challenges that I had mentioned. And when you have, so our customers are looking at hybrid systems where you can have your TMS, WMS, and IMS all talking together, and then ultimately integrating with your ERP, your CRM, your different platforms. So, in the race to automate, I see the key challenge as integrating, but I see the key solution as finding a technology partner who can help you manage that migration.
Thank you. Colleagues, I really appreciate your time and all your answers and all your participants. So, hopefully to see you on the same boards again. And if you want, we can say some few words at the end for our audience. If you want, we can have it.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Sure.
I can close
Yeah,
out.
Andrew.
Yes, thank
Andrew,
you for
please.
allowing US Cold to participate. And as always, we value the relationship we've developed with Innovex over the last few years, and look forward to continuing to grow together and continued successes together.
Andrew Komarov.
Thanks, guys, for contribution. It was a great talk. Thanks, Dennis, for moderating this. Hope we'll meet once more.
Sure. Michael.
I just want to thank Andrew. Special thanks to Andrew for being here today. We've, their U.S. Cold Storage is a valued customer of ours, and we've got some history with them, and we're looking at some integrating all of their warehouses, and so it's great to get his feedback. I know it's been a great education for me to have Andrew here. So again, thanks for participating, Andrew, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you all, and I'm really glad we have this meeting today discussing the key bottlenecks for supply chain industry, and have also practical discussion and practical questions how we resolve them and how we work with them. Hope to stay in touch with all of you in future. See you and have a good day.